Thank you so much for joining. I'm Pierina. I'm a product advocate here at Metabase, and I'm here today with Steven, who is going to be our presenter today and who's going to be conducting our workshop. He is a data and analytics practitioner with over 15 years of experience across data science, market research, and AI. And he's the former chief of data of North1. And now he's the co-founder of Milieu Insights. And he also has a podcast, and he's also part of our Metabase Beacons program. So thank you so much, Stephen, for being here today. And with that, I give you the stage. Please use the chat. We have a Q&A, and we will be able to answer all your questions. Thank you, Stephen. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. It's really great to see you all. I'm really excited to be talking about this topic. So as Pierina mentioned, I don't work for Metabase. I'm just a longtime user and customer, both of open source and I've been an enterprise customer in the past. I'm just a big fan of the platform. And I'm also very excited about some of the new features that we've started to see roll out since about version 58 or 59, which start to unlock a lot of really interesting AI features. And that's what we're going to jump into today. Before we jump into slides in the workshop, we've got a couple polls just to get to know all of you. So Ramiro, can we tee up the first poll? And if you're first time using this software, which it probably is, there should be a little polls icon that pops up somewhere. If we just give that a second. The first question, I believe, is going to be about what department you work in. Yeah, we'll just give that a second. And if you've just joined, feel free to say hello in the chat and where you're dialing in from. Ramiro, are the polls, is the first poll live yet? I don't see it. All right, just give it another 2 seconds. Alternatively, I think we can come back to the polls.
I think, yes, one of the polls is live.
I don't see it.
And then I think they had 2 polls already. So yeah, I think we got the polls. I think we just don't see them. Yep. So all good.
Okay.
Thanks. Andrew could confirm that they already got the polls. Thanks.
Oh, that's weird. Last time we were able to see it on the screen, so we could actually see, like, share the results. Maybe we can see if we can do that later on, because I think it'd be quite. I was hoping to see the results, but that's okay. Okay, so let's jump in to the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to tell everyone in advance here, this is not going to be a slides-heavy presentation. I'm going to spend a few minutes just setting some context here, and then what I'm going to end up doing here is switching over and doing kind of a live walkthrough. So before I jump into things, can I just make sure that everyone can see my screen okay? Thumbs up. Pierina, do you want to give me a thumbs up? I can't.
Yeah,
oh, okay, perfect. Sorry. All right, we're good to go. Okay, so as mentioned, my name is Stephen Tracy. As a quick introduction, I've had a long career working in the field of data. I'm a data scientist by training. I originally started my career working for big ad agencies like McCann, Publicis. I started out as a data analyst / data scientist, eventually went into the kind of management sphere as the managing director of a data provider called YouGov. And Milieu, I think this was a company that I co-founded many years back. I've now left that company. This was a SaaS company that provided data visualization and data collection functionality and things like that. I was the chief data officer at a big fintech, which was based in or focused on the US. Currently, I run a data consultancy called Mosaic. And what we do is everything from team development to big architecture projects, refactoring, migrations, BI, et cetera. And that's where I actually get to work with Metabase quite a bit in my day-to-day. And I've also been a customer of Metabase in the past. So this startup Milieu, we used Metabase open source, and at North One, we actually used it as a enterprise customer. Beyond my background, I also love to teach. So you'll find me on platforms like Coursera and Udemy. I have over 50,000 students across my 7 courses, which cover things like data visualization, AI, machine learning, market research, etc. And I also run a blog where I write about geeky things. And so you'll probably get a sense that I have a lot of balls in the air. I like to do a lot of different things, it keeps me extremely busy. If you want to connect with me, you can scan my link tree here. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, follow my blog, check out my courses, and this presentation deck will be shared afterwards. Okay, so on to the topic for today. We're going to be talking about MCPs, CLIs, data analysis, but I want to start with some context. I assume most people here work in the field of data. Either you're a data practitioner, or maybe you manage a team, or you're interested in becoming a data practitioner. The work of data professionals has or is changing a lot. And this is obvious, and for obvious reasons. It's AI. But as someone who is currently doing, I do a lot of consultancy work and fractional chief data officer work. And over the last year, I've had the chance to get front row seats to how many different companies are building AI stacks, and how the work of data practitioners is changing, but also how non-data savvy users are starting to work with data. And I can't tell you enough about how the last 12 months in particular has really, really changed. Like, we've had large language models and language AI for years now. But for me, the rapid change has really been in the last 12 months. So a couple of observations. One is that the roles of data practitioners is really blending. I'm not saying that we're erasing the lines between an engineer and a data scientist and a data analyst, but I am starting to see cases where either some companies are actually starting to put out job descriptions for blended roles. In other cases, there's just this unspoken expectation now where a data analyst might have to do or be expected to do some engineering type work, or an engineer might be expected to do some dashboarding and BI work. So the lines between the traditional data practitioner functions is absolutely blending. Now, this is different at all kinds of different companies. Some companies are further along. Some companies are still using more traditional models, but this is something that's definitely happening. The next thing is that execution, hard technical skills, is becoming commoditized. And that is hard for some people to hear. But what is now really important is judgment. So the reality is that because of LLMs, anyone can write SQL, anyone can spin up a machine learning model, anyone can build a dashboard with a single prompt. That doesn't mean that it's good, or that it's safe, or that it's accurate. This is just the reality of it, is that AI is very good at coding. We all know this now. And it allows non-expert users to be able to do things that were traditionally done by experts. But the thing that's really important here is judgment. Do you have the ability to evaluate the output and iterate? Do you know how to manage risk and things like that? So in the world of data, which is a very technical domain, this is an interesting change. Data practitioners are more and more becoming reviewers and orchestrators of agents. Again, another hard thing for some people to hear. And I'm not saying this is 100% of the job. It's just more of the job and this is more common in companies that I would say are AI pace setters, that already have really well-established AI stacks and kind of know and have kind of built out solid AI infrastructure. A lot of their data team members are spending a material portion of their day, not all of it, reviewing the work of AI agents or orchestrating agents. This one is really interesting. Self-serve among non-data users is finally becoming real. This has been around for forever. In fact, I was an early user of Looker Studio before Google bought it. And I loved Looker when it first came out because they introduced Looker ML, which was the whole promise of Looker ML was for non-data savvy users to be able to write queries in their natural language. And they were one of the first companies to have a Slackbot integration where I could write Looker ML queries, or get my team that doesn't know how to write SQL to do that, and they could get rendered images back. And I did lots of projects where we built out that kind of infrastructure. It never really took off, the self-service model. in the way that I'm seeing it happen now. Now I'm seeing companies build either custom MCPs or leverage commercial MCPs that Claude already has built up. And more people are starting to self-serve in ways that I just haven't seen happen before. And I love this. I think this is great. It keeps me up at night because the risk of just hooking up an LLM to a warehouse without a semantic layer, without instructions for how to handle queries or technical instrumentation to make sure that that LLM knows what to query and how to query, that can create a lot of risk for the company. Either you're going to burn a lot of tokens without having that kind of stuff in place, like a semantic layer, or it might actually get the queries wrong. So I am very excited about the increased usage of self-serve, but I also think it's really, there's an outsized risk for companies, and they need to make sure they get some of these things right. And that's why I really like Metabase, because I think it creates a more controlled environment where it has native functionality or support for semantics and other things that will make your AI bot more performant and safer. The last thing, I think some of you who are at more AI savvy companies have probably seen, is the rise of generative BI. What I mean by this is, instead of, people are now circumventing their traditional enterprise BI tools like Tableau and Power BI, and they're just getting Claude to build a dashboard. And again, I love the spirit of this. I think it's really cool. But this creates other problems. First of all, in some of the customers I'm working with, you start to see now people are passing around these .html files everywhere. So they'll build a dashboard, bake it into a flat HTML. They're not hosted anywhere, and they're just passing around these HTML files, which, again, I like the spirit of it, but these things are not hosted anywhere. There's also some risk to it because it's harder to observe how the Claude or model actually baked in and defined metrics and handled some of the ETL. It's much harder to determine. The other thing, or observe, I should say, the other thing too, is that you end up asking Claude to kind of roll the dice on the tech stack it's using. So usually if you say, Claude, build a dashboard, it's going to use like a React front end and maybe like d3.js or something. But the reality is that unless you give it specific instructions, it's going to rebuild this in whatever tech stack it wants, which may not be the best way of doing it. And again, this is why I'm really excited about Metabase, because it creates a safer, more controlled environment to do things like generative BI and dashboarding. And we're going to do a demo of that momentarily. I just want to show another example of this. So this is an example of a dashboard, which is a one-shot dashboard. It's a single prompt. And this basically, the single prompt took a CSV with 18,000 rows of data and created a fully interactive V plus React front end powered by eCharts and D3. It's fully interactive. You can play with those little filters and all that stuff. It also it handled all the ETL transformation, stuff like that. And this was all done with 11 minutes of inference on Claude. I think this was done with Sonnet, 21,000 tokens, and about 18 cents worth of API costs. I'm not saying that this is great. I'm also not saying that this is the future of BI, and the need for BI specialists who design dashboards and think about audience needs and all that stuff is going to go away. But you can't ignore the implications of this on productivity. Historically, to build a dashboard using your traditional tools like Tableau or Power BI, it took days. If you go back far enough, it took weeks, because you'd have to map it out. You have to make sure all the data is in your schema. If it's not, you might have to do some more ETL or pipeline work. You're working with engineers and BI specialists. It takes a lot of time. This happens in 11 minutes. And again, I'm not saying that this is good, but we have to acknowledge the fact that this is creating interesting questions for us about how we work and productivity. But of course, it raises other questions, which is this actually good? Is it more efficient if you actually factor in the time it's going to take to fix it or improve on it before you send it to your stakeholders? Maybe the time actually takes longer than a traditional approach to BI. Is it accurate? So when you get Claude to do all this in a single prompt or in a couple prompts, it's harder to observe how these metrics were actually quantified. So is it accurate? Is it safe? I'm talking to a lot of customers now that are trying to figure out governance requirements that help kind of decide whether and what data you can upload to a frontier model provider servers. Do you want to be sending all your company sensitive data to OpenAI or Anthropic servers? And does it actually create value? And this is This is the thing I've seen a lot more in the last year, which is a lot more of this kind of generative BI that is circumventing traditional BI tools, which the spirit of it I really like, but I also think it creates a lot of risk. And this is why I'm going to show you some of the cool things you can do with Metabase in this particular case. Now, most of you probably know what an MCP or CLI is. We're going to do some quick definitions just in case anyone is new to this. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It's an open standard that was actually created by Anthropic for connecting AI models to external tools and data. If you haven't played with MCPs, you can connect it to tools like Metabase. You could connect it to your Gmail inbox, to Google Drive. And what it does is it creates that bridge between your model and your source, whatever you want to connect it to. And it also, MCPs will have tools. So it can do things more than just in a chatbot, you generally get text back. But MCPs usually can do things. They can go and write code, build things, and we'll talk about what the MCP for Metabase can do. CLI is also something that's getting talked a lot more about these days. And if you are a technical person, like a coder or developer, you've been living in a CLI forever. But if you're a data analyst that's not necessarily a coder or not very technical, this might be newer to you. And you might also ask, why the heck would I do this? But CLI stands for command line interface. It's basically working in the terminal. So if you've ever opened up your Mac and opened terminal, that's what it is. And it's a text-based way for humans to interact with software. And we're going to show what you can do with the CLI, the Metabase CLI. And we'll actually get to, or I'll demonstrate why you might reach for MCP versus CLI. The teaser is that the MCP is going to be able to, it's going to be great for querying, getting answers, Q&Aing, doing analysis, creating dashboards. And actually the CLI can do a lot of those things, but the CLI is going to be better for more long tail, multi-step work, like migrating dashboards or doing other things like creating transforms in Metabase and things like that. So what are we going to cover in the rest of the workshop? I'm going to briefly talk about my environment because I'm running Metabase open source. And if there's anyone here who is new to Metabase and wants to try it out, open source is a great way to do it because you can run it right locally on your own laptop, do a proof of concept before you show it to your colleagues, or if you're just trying to learn about it, you can run it locally. We're going to show you how to set up the MCP. We'll talk about the tools it has access to. We'll do a quick demo of the MCP, and then we're going to move over to the CLI. I'll show you how to set it up. We'll do a quick demo of the CLI, and we're going to finish off with a bit of a Q&A. Okay, sorry, just checking the time here. Let's start with the environment setup, because if anyone here is an enterprise customer where you're on a hosted environment, you're not going to have to worry about any of this. But again, there's many people on the call today. And for anyone who wants to try Metabase out, you can basically download Docker for free and get up and running with Metabase using a Docker pull in 3 clicks. So I do want to explain some of the requirements for you if you are going to be setting up a Metabase for the first time locally, either to learn, to test it, or to build a pilot. So I'm running Metabase. I'm on v6.2. I think we're close to v63 now. But I'm currently on the production version of v62. I'm using Docker for virtualization. If you don't know what that is, it just means it creates a virtual server environment on your machine where you can contain Docker and Metabase. And Docker makes it super easy to install Metabase. You just need to go into a couple button clicks and click find Metabase and pull it down. The other thing, though, about local installs of Metabase is that it's localhost. So if you want to leverage any of the AI tools, you have to create what's called a tunnel where it exposes your local host to the internet. Because when you run Metabase locally on your machine, it can send information out, but it can't bring it back in. So when you do inference, like if you try to do some kind of LLM call, it'll go out to Anthropic servers, but Anthropic can't send it back to your environment unless you create a tunnel. The nice thing about tunnels is that if you can do it for free on Cloudflare, as long as you have a domain managed on Cloudflare, you can set up a tunnel completely for free. And if this is too technical for you, you can set up the Cloudflare MCP in Claude and get it to do it for you. So it's crazy the things we can do or non-technical folks can do these days. I'm using Supabase for Postgres. I'm going to be using Anthropic keys for inference. And then I use Ghosty because I'm geeky for terminal. It's just an alternative terminal that has some cool different skins and stuff like that. And then for the MCP environment, I'm going to be using Claude Desktop. You can also use VS Code. You can use different harnesses, but we're going to do this all in Claude Desktop. But for CLI, I'll show you stuff in Terminal. So that is my setup. And before we jump into the install for the MCP, you can go to this link. This is a Notion board that has a whole bunch of takeaways from the session. You can scan it now. I'll have the screen on for another 10 seconds. But if you don't catch this QR code by the time I take it off the screen, you can always, we'll send this out after to you after the session is done. So let me show you what is in that Notion board very quickly. Here we go. So if you follow that link or that QR code, what I've curated here is just a bunch of takeaways from this workshop. One is I have all of the documentation from Metabase. So if you want to learn how to install it, that's pretty straightforward, as well as the documentation for the MCP and CLI. This is probably going to be quite useful because it has some really important information about the setup. It's all really straightforward. So even if you're new to working in Terminal or some of this stuff, you'll get there. It's not going to be too difficult. I also have some example Docker run commands. So you can install Metabase just without touching Terminal and clicking buttons and stuff like that. But by default, you won't have some of the variables that you will need for a localhost version of Docker that can do inference and LLM calls. You will need, for example, to set up an encryption key. And instead of the standard Docker run commands that won't have this stuff, you can basically run this inside of Docker. You'll have to get an encryption key, and it will set up an environment that is ready for you to start using LLMs. So I also even have a command you can run here to generate your encryption key. So it's just 2 steps. There's some other information in here about that explains like what the MCP server can do, the CLI, and I've also included this troubleshooting prompt. So what this will do for you is if you're having trouble installing Metabase or getting the CLI or MCP to work, just plug this prompt into your LLM of choice, whether it's Gemini or Claude, and it will troubleshoot for you. So all it does is it just gives it all kinds of context, like you're a BI infrastructure expert. I'm working with Metabase open source. I'm using Cloudflare for tunnels, blah, 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 blah. So this is, you might have to customize some of this if you change any of the variables, but this just means that you can run this prompt and then instantly tell it like, hey, I'm stuck here. How do I fix this? And it can try and debug it for you. So that is what is covered inside of this Notion document, everything you'll need to get up and running. Including, actually, I forgot at the bottom here, some of the prompts I'm going to show in the demos. So if you want to do an exact walkthrough of some of the things I'm going to show later on, they're all covered here. Okay, on to the workshop. So we are going to show you the install for the MCP first, and then we'll do some demos. So this is my locally installed version of Metabase, but again, I've tunneled, so I've exposed it to this URL here. And I'm going to be working mostly with the sample database that comes baked into Metabase. So again, if you're new or you're a student trying to learn BI, I love this because it comes with these tables that you can use for learning. So it's really cool. So to install the MCP, when you first log in, you're going to click on this icon over here and go to admin. And you want to go to AI. Now, the first thing here, this is not for the MCP. This is if you want to use Metabot, which is their inbuilt text-to-SQL tool. So here you can see I've already added in my API keys for Anthropic, and you can choose your default model. I'm going to talk about model selection in a minute. But what this is doing is it gives you access to Metabot. So Metabot is right here, and you can see I've already asked it a few questions. How many orders in, let's say, February 2026. And this is using my Claude API keys, and it's basically querying my database. So this is what Metabot is. I did a workshop on this a while ago, and it'll answer questions for you, and you can click on this and get access to it. It's all very cool. But to set up the MCP, you're actually going to go to AI and click on MCP here. Now, remember, you have to be on a certain version for this. I recommend making sure you're on production for I think at least v62, but I believe the MCP is available from 59 or 58 onward. The Metabase folks can maybe confirm that. So you should make sure you're on the latest production version. For the MCP setup, you just go to MCP settings here, toggle this on, and then you'll want to take note of your MCP server URL here. But what you can also do is toggle on the tools that you're going to allow inline charts. This is a really cool feature where not only can you get answers back inside of your LLM tool or harness, it'll actually embed charts. And I'm going to show you what this looks like. So definitely switch this on, but you're going to be limited to Claude Desktop, Cursor or VS Code, or ChatGPT. But these are very good options. There's one other thing I want to mention before we get to the demo of the MCP, which is the importance of a semantic layer. So the semantic layer can live in different places, whether it's in your warehouse like Snowflake, or you can actually build it in a tool like Metabase. If you're not familiar with what a semantic layer is, it's a human readable definition of your warehouse, your tables, your data, so that historically it was for people to be able to understand it. Now it's for LLMs. And so an example of this is here you can see I have this orders table, and here I have this description of it. And then in the fields, there's descriptions of each of the fields. You can also do other things like this glossary is really helpful where you can define different terms. So let's say we have orders, but my salespeople often say transactions. You can create that glossary here, and all like the AI tools will refer to these semantics, and it will just make it much more better at finding the data you need. If you don't have a semantic layer, two things are going to happen. One is you're either going to burn tokens because the LLM needs to it's not going to effectively be able to find data in your warehouse. It's going to spend a lot more time just traversing data. And you actually have a higher risk of it making bad decisions or writing bad SQL. So semantic layers are very important. And I just want to mention this, like, if you don't have a semantic layer built out, either in a tool like Metabase or in your source, in your warehouse, you need to do that first. You don't want to run headfirst into doing, MCPs and LLM text-to-SQL calls without properly describing and defining your warehouse. So, okay. Let's look at now, let's jump over to Claude. So I've got Claude here. Now, there is one more step you need to go through in order to create the connection. So we've already switched on the MCP inside of Metabase, where there's actually two ways you can turn on the MCP server in Claude. One is in the documentation here, you can jump down to the command lines that you can run to essentially install the MCP server. If you're less technical, you can also do this via the UI. So you just go to settings, go to connectors, and you can see I've got all these different connectors here. If you don't have it set up already, go to browse, add and browse connectors, and you'll see that you can look for Metabase. There it is. I already have it installed, but if you just click connect, follow the steps, it will go through an authorization, or it'll roll out an auth, and it'll hopefully create that connection for you. And once it's done, we can start talking to the MCP inside of Claude. It also gives you a summary of the tools here. I'm going to actually show you this in a second, but you can get a quick glance on like what it can do today. Note that this is going to change over time. Metabase, as they roll out new features and functionality, they might introduce new tools. But it is important for you to know what it can actually do. So let's go and start a new chat here. So we're using the Claude app. Let's take a minute to talk about the importance of model selection, because choosing models is an important part of this process. So every model, frontier model provider usually has 3 tiers of models: fast, quick models, your mid-tier, and then your deep thinking models like Opus or Fable class models. I generally find that fast models are not good for text to SQL or for this kind of work. If you're querying data that already exists, like you're asking questions for queries that already exist, Haiku might work well. I have generally found that Sonnet is where you want to be starting. Sonnet is going to be really good for writing queries, even if it involves complex table joins and stuff like that. But I do find that some of the more complex multi-step work that you might do with the CLI needs to be, it's better to go with a Opus class level model, or it could be like a Gemini thinking model, which doesn't really matter because we don't have support for Gemini yet. So really focus on Sonnet and Opus. I think a lot of the stuff you can do is with Sonnet. You can also adjust the level of effort. I actually recommend defaulting to high, and you can increase it if you want. But let's start off with Sonnet on high. So what tools do you have in Metabase? So I just want to ask it what it can do. And it's going to, it's going to leverage the MCP connector now. You can see, you can always click on this to see what it's actually doing. So you can tell that it's found the tools. And there we go. It's giving me a quick summary of what it can do. You've already seen this in a few places, and this is in my Notion document, but it's worth taking a moment to just absorb this. So what can the MCP do? Well, it can search and query. It can find things that already exist. You should think about that. You don't have to write new SQL or write new queries every single time you have a new question. So like you can, it's just sometimes best to try and find queries or dashboards or documents that already exist. You can execute new SQL. These are the things that are really exciting. You can write new questions or queries. You can also create dashboards and collections. And I'm going to show you some of the stuff now. So the thing I should mention though, is that my setup here, I have two different databases. One is connected to Supabase. The other is actually just the sample database that comes baked into the localhost instance. I want to, for now, just talk to this sample database. So let me tell, I have Metabase has two data sources, MB Supabase and sample database. Going forward, only use sample database. And I'm doing this in chat now. You can also use like Claude Code or Claude Cowork and create a claude.md file that has some marching orders so that you don't have to write the prompt every time. So I also recommend doing things like that, where you can leverage the ability of Claude to look into folders and access memory rather than you having to write these things every time. So I'd actually recommend using things like Cowork or Code. One thing I forgot to just put in this, which is I usually like to ask it to confirm. I've been burned a lot of times where like I'm coding with Claude Code and I tell it at the beginning to work on this sub branch in GitHub or work on a specific work tree, and it just ignores my my request and merges something to main or something. I've noticed this happen, like this is not like a year ago. This is in the last couple months. So I've gotten the habit of asking it to confirm and what it's doing and things like that. So we know now that we are talking to the sample database, which is good. So let's run a couple of queries. I've got a couple kind of ready to copy and paste here. So how much revenue and how many orders did we do in the last 3 months? How does it compare to the previous 3 months? And I'm going to leave the model here on Sonnet 5 and high effort. It's going to take a few minutes here. Again, you can click on the kind of the text here to see what it's actually doing and see how it's thinking. This is the sample database, so there's some funny quirks about it that it might call up and say, hey, this is not a real data set. But it'll take a few minutes here. You can speed this up. Again, I do find that if you increase the effort or if you go to like an Opus class model, it might return it faster, but you're using more tokens. So you have to kind of get into the habit of deciding when you want things faster or when you need to use a higher quality model. So here we go. We have a simple table built directly into the Claude interface. So we asked a question, we got an answer back here. Now it has done something here where it's just returned the answer here. It hasn't saved anything inside of Metabase. So I could say, hey, save this as a new collection. And now you'll be able to go and find it in Metabase. So let's say, yes, save as new query in my, what is my, let's say, my personal collection. And it's just going to, this shouldn't take too long. It'll just come back to me with a link where I can find this query now inside of Metabase. Now, here's the thing where things get, we'll wait for this to show up. But the next thing is I want to show you how you can embed or get charts directly inside of Claude. Let's just let this run. It's still running the tool call. So once this is done, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it for a chart. And the cool thing is, if you remember that feature that I toggled on earlier, which allows for embedded charts in Claude or VS Code, it actually it allows you to visualize your data right inside of Claude without having to open up Metabase. So here you can see it's now saved these questions for me. So I can click on these, open this up in Metabase, and here it is. It's nothing special happening here, but I can, it's saved these already too. So it's saved them into my personal collection, which is great. So now we have something saved. I'm going to move on to the next question here, which is I'm going to ask it for a time series chart. So if you want it to visualize data, tell it to visualize data. So if you just ask a question like, hey, tell me how many orders I had last month, or do analysis of this particular trend, it'll do that analysis and it will return nested or embedded tables and text to you. But if you want it to visualize data, include that in your prompt and say, show me a time series with daily grain or monthly grain over the last 12 months with whatever variables you want. So in this case, I'm asking it to show me monthly rev broken down by product category with a 12-month grain. And so it's going to build a chart here, and there we go. It's rendered it. I love this. This is so cool because lots of people are doing data viz inside of Claude already, but what they're getting it to do is render a flat image. So if they say, hey, here's a data set, create a chart. Okay, it's created a chart, but you have to go through iterations to tell it how to reformat the chart, and it's an image. This is now embedded a fully interactive graphic inside of Claude. So you can change the type of chart or turn it to a table. You can change the grain. So if you want it to be daily, weekly, monthly. Now this is not saved anywhere, but you can click on this Explore in Metabase, open link here. And now you can save this and say, okay, save this. Let's call it monthly orders by product. And now you have this saved. You can retrieve it anytime you want. It is, where is it there? It's monthly orders by product. It's right there. So it's retrievable. Now, by default in Metabase, anything that's in your personal collection is not viewable by anyone else. But if you have a shared collection, I can push that over to the shared collection and now share it with other people. So what I really like about this is that you can generate interactive charts right inside of Metabase. And we're not creating rendered images. We're getting an interactive chart, but it's also leveraging the environment that Metabase offers, like the semantic layer and all the existing dashboards and tables you have, so that when it's writing new queries, it's referencing other things you have in your environment so that it's not just writing it from scratch. So that's an example of how you can get charts, embeddable charts right inside of Claude. Now let's talk about a dashboard, and I'm going to show you. Let's just run this. So this is a bad idea. So you could say, just build me a product dashboard, and it will do that. It will do what you say. This might take about 4 or 5 minutes. So I already have one saved. Let's see. I'll come back to this later. So it's writing queries. So what I'm doing now is I'm just giving it a really poor prompt, and I'm not giving it a lot of information and just asking it to build something. And let me show you an example of that. Should be in my, where did I say it? Performance dashboard. I think I labeled it bad. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is an example of what I got from a previous run on that exact prompt. Oh, it's here already. Okay, so there we go. It built that really fast. So there we go. It actually looks very similar to this one. The problem with this is that it's not very good. I mean, it's not bad. It's written for new queries and it's assembled it into a Metabase dashboard, and you can start editing it. So yeah, I can start adding text and say, okay, this is a header, my dashboard. I can add that up here. I can start reorganizing things. If I want to make this bigger, I can move this around. So, okay, you could give it a bad prompt or a poor prompt and ask it to, and then just iterate it, improve it. What I generally recommend you do is give it a more detailed prompt. Here's an example of what that might look like. So this one's going to take longer to run here, but here is a better prompt. And even this, I think, could be improved. So if you're asking it to write a prompt, first of all, I would recommend that you try and leverage existing queries, because it's an increased load for the LLM to both write queries and assemble and build a dashboard. So if you already have what I like, a good workflow is go through a session with Claude, ask it to create queries, ask it to save to a new collection. And then when you have all those queries ready and you want to dashboard those queries, ask it or tell it to only assemble or build a dashboard off of the queries in that collection. What I also do in this prompt is I tell it who it's for. This is an executive level dashboard. If you are telling it what queries to use, it's less important for you to describe the metrics. It's also great to give it a reference dashboard. So if you have another great dashboard in Metabase, like let's say our analytics, we have this example dashboard here. Let's say this is an example you really like. You can tell it in the prompt, reference this dashboard as a starting point. You could even create a template in your organization and say, always use this template when building new dashboards. And here's an example of what this prompt, the second one that I showed here, this more in-depth prompt would build, which is performance, this one here. So all it did was it started to add in more structure. It added this KPI lane at the top here with our core KPIs. It added some headers. It organized it a little bit nicer. Again, there's still some work to be done here, but it's taken away at least 50% of the effort of just kind of assembling all the stuff. So there's some really cool stuff you can do with generative dashboards. But one thing to keep in mind is that don't think about this as getting 100% of the job done. This is going to do 50 to 70% of the work. You need to pick it up and build on it. Don't just take the dashboard and send it off to your stakeholders. Go in and make some iterations and tweaks. You can also go in and make sure that it's written the queries in the right way. You can go to the editor and see how it built it, or actually read the SQL. Actually verify that it's done what it's supposed to do. But like I said, the more in-depth your prompt, the better the quality of the output is going to be. But I think the biggest tip I would give you here is reference dashboards, like build out a template that it can use, or just point it to another dashboard that you really like. Okay, that is Claude MCP. I want to show you some stuff in the CLI now as well. So let me open up my terminal here. Okay, so the first thing is, again, if you go to the documentation with the CLI, there are some requirements here. First of all, you have to have Node.js installed. You can just follow the instructions here. So you'll need to do an npm install of the packages. And then you'll have to go through a simple authorization to make sure that it is authorized to run the commands in your terminal. Again, just follow these steps and you'll be able to get up and running. I already have this installed, but let me just show you what you might run. So after you do the npm install, you would do the npm mbauth login. So this is just going to log into your Metabase instance. So my profile name is default. I'm going to type in my instance, my URL. In this case, this is my tunneled URL, metabase.stephentracy.co. And then it's going to ask you for an API key. So this is where we're going to go back into Metabase, and you're going to go to admin, and you're going to go to authentication, API keys, and this is where you can generate your API key. If you've never generated an API key, you only get to look at it once. So make sure you write this down somewhere, although you can regenerate your key if needed. You can also assign permissions to the key if needed, but you're going to need to get this key, and then you can type it or paste it into here. And this will essentially be the last step before you can start using the CLI. So I don't need to re-authenticate. What you can do is if you just want to start looking at what it can do, I'm going to run mb help. This is going to show you what are some of the commands it can run. So let's say I just want to get a list of my databases, mb db lists. And I only have 2, so there's not that many. Now, there's lots of other really cool things you can do, but if you're going to start doing things that involve writing or building things, it's going to get very technical very quickly, which is where the CLI agent comes into play, and it's very, very cool. So one last thing you'll have to do here is install the CLI agent, because if you're going to use the terminal or CLI this way, you're going to need to be quite technical. But the agent can do these technical things for you. So this is also linked in my Notion board up here. Let me show you. Metabase CLI skill doc. So you can just go to this GitHub page and it'll give you the instructions to install it. And after it's installed, it's available as a skill that Claude can now leverage. So I'm going to run Claude here. I need 2 MCP servers. Let me just check which ones are not authenticated. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's a Gmail. Okay, so I now have Claude running, and I'm going to call the Metabase CLI here. So it's going to initiate it. And my permissions are different for the terminal here, so it's going to inundate me with permissions in a minute, but it's loaded now. So now you can start doing some really cool things with the Metabase CLI. You can do a lot of the things you can do with the MCP. So I can say using sample database, how many orders or how much revenue did we generate last month? So I can ask questions. I don't think this is going to be the best environment to be getting queries or asking queries, but it will get you answers to that. The CLI is going to be better for more productivity, multi-step work, which I'm going to show you some examples of. But let's just see where this goes. Okay, it's working through a very simple query, and I need to give it permissions. I need to change my permissions. And it'll return the answer. It's not going to do like the nested charts or tables. It can't do that in the command line. So there we go. There's an answer to my question. Great. But again, is this the best use of the CLI? Probably not. You're probably better off using a different harness like Claude Desktop. But here's an example of some things we can do that are really cool. So what I'm going to show you is the first use case is a transform. The second one is a dashboard migration. So Metabase offers the ability to do transforms. So if you want to do some ETL in the Metabase environment, you can do that. So here, I can run this prompt here, and it basically tells it to create a transform that's SQL based using this database. And these are all my instructions here. You can read through it if you want. It's got some information about quirks in the data set. I can run this in the CLI. I'm not going to run it now because this is going to take about 10 or 11 minutes of inference. It's going to, because it's involving complex multi-step tasks and logic. But once I did run this before, and if we go to the data studio and go to transforms, you can see, I did this a couple weeks ago, you can see that, okay, this transform was created by the Metabase CLI, and there it is. So it's a very simple transform. I can set the schedule, so I can say run this daily or weekly. Right now, there's no schedule, so it's only run ad hoc. And if I want to see the output of this transform, I can go to database, and it's in my Supabase instance here, and there it is. So now it's created this ETL transformation as a new table that I can set it on a schedule, and this was all run by my agent. So a great example of something that might have taken an engineer couple hours or some time to do, and now you can just basically hand this to your agent, kind of leave it and come back to it and see that it's done. But again, you always want to check the work, so check how it did it, check the code it wrote, etc. Another great use case here is migration work. So it's very common now for people to be migrating to new warehouses or to set up multiple warehouses. So let's say you're a Metabase customer and you have multiple databases. In this case, I have Sample and Supabase, but just imagine one of these was Redshift and another was Snowflake. And you have all these great dashboards that you want to rebuild inside of the target warehouse. So let's say everything that you have today is built in Redshift, but you are moving to Snowflake and you want to rebuild all of your dashboards. This is a great task to throw to the CLI. So again, I'm not going to run this. Here's an example of the prompt you can run. It's in the document. This is going to take at least 10 minutes. It's not something I want to make you sit through now. And this ran successfully. And you can see if I go to this collection here, this was the one that was created in the migration. So this product performance is on the sample database. This one is on Supabase. And you can see it was built by the Metabase CLI. And it looks exactly the same as my database or my dashboard on the original database. So that's cool. It's now it's taking the heavy lifting out of a big, heavy migration of your BI and dashboards over to a new environment. So that's a great example of where the CLI is going to be really useful for you. And let me just finish off with a quick summary of when to reach for MCP versus CLI. The MCP is going to be great for exploring data, asking questions, generating interactive charts. It's going to be awesome for your non-data savvy users to self-serve because they can ask questions and get answers back. And you can also, it's great for asking those kind of discovery-based questions like, what's my revenue trend? You also can ask it more creative questions. It doesn't have to be like, write a query that does this. You can say, analyze my product, a trend over the last 90 days and tell me if anything interesting happened. The CLI is going to be for that bulk repeatable work. Migrations, refactors, that kind of stuff. The examples I gave you, like building a transform, migrating a database, great uses of the CLI. Remember, the CLI can actually do a lot of things the MCP can do, but it's not going to be the best place to be doing like data exploration. Some tips I'll finish with on using mostly the MCP and generating dashboards. Semantics matter. You need to have a good semantic layer, whether it's in your warehouse or in your BI layer or in Metabase. If you don't have this, I don't recommend you jump into using LLMs because you're going to burn tokens, or you are going to, you might have data quality issues. If it doesn't have a good reference to use through a semantic layer, it might write queries that are actually wrong. When you're building dashboards generatively, be verbose. Don't just create a dashboard. Explain what you want, explain who it's for, give it reference material like other dashboards, and you'll get a better output. Iterate, don't one shot. Don't take the dashboard that it generated and just roll with it. That's risky. You always want to treat this as doing 50 to 70% of the work, and then you take it the last mile. So verify, check the queries, do some QA, and make some modifications and iterate it. Choose your models wisely. I see a lot of people just putting on Opus and just running with that for everything. You're wasting tokens if you're doing that. You have to get in the habit of knowing what models are fit for purpose. And I know it sounds annoying, but it's the world we live in because there are drastic differences between how Sonnet and Opus and Fable are going to perform and across different levels of effort. To spend some time benchmarking this. Try running queries, simple, complex queries, and benchmark the output. But generally, my recommendation is start at Sonnet or mid-tier level models and only switch on Opus class or Opus class models for complex multi-step processes. You don't need Fable. Fable's not, I've done a lot of stuff or testing with Fable. It doesn't outperform Opus for a lot of data kind of engineering work. And also map these tools to existing workflows. So you can get it up and running in some of this stuff really quickly. And you might be able to do some cool stuff. But where this really starts to unlock value is taking these tools and replacing or augmenting existing workflows, something that's really manual for you and the team today. Find ways to rework those workflows using these tools like MCP or CLI, but also stress test them. So if you're doing things like a warehouse or dashboard migration using the CLI, you need to stress test it. You need to understand the failure modes and where this can go wrong. Because if you just run headfirst into, getting it to start doing a migration, it might make mistakes or might make errors. This is not a critique of Metabase. It's the LLM that might make the mistakes. So make sure that you stress test this, do a pilot before rolling this out to like a full migration project. And that is it. So there's another quick plug for the course that I recently launched with a fellow data scientist named Lisa Schiller. She's a brilliant data scientist and also a fan of Metabase. And this course actually quite heavily features Metabase. So if you're interested in learning about how to do it, you can check out that course. I'm also doing some research currently on the world of AI fluency. And if you're interested in learning about the importance of verifying or iterating, when using LLMs. I've recently launched this AI fluency assessment, which you can take at this URL, jobaq.me. It's kind of a little bit of a side project, but it's all about learning how to be a better judge of, having better judgment when using LLMs. So we have kind of reached time here. That is it for today. You are going to get links to all the things that I shared, including the slides. But I think we're going to fit in a few questions for the Q&A. Yeah. So how are we doing for the questions?
Cool. Thank you so much, Steven. So yeah, we have a few more minutes, so we're going to try to cover as much as we can. Let's start with one of the questions that had the most upvotes. I'm going to put it in the stream. So basically, when having a lot of legacy data and looking to giving access to different stakeholders across the organization, I may need to instruct specific tables to use and specific ways to use them beyond the semantic layer. Would those instructions live in the prompt, project, skill only? What do you recommend based on your experience?
Great question. So there's many different ways to do this. One is the semantic layer. So labeling tables, columns, all that stuff is essential. But now what you're talking about is attention. So even though you might have things described, if you have 1,000 schemas or you have 10,000 tables, there's still going to be a lot of challenges, even with the semantic layer. And so an easy fix for this is a Claude.md file. This is not going to be scalable, but if you have a set of tables that you know are high quality or primary tables and that you want to direct it to, then you can use in Cowork or in Claude. In Cowork, you can create model instructions in Cowork. In Claude, you can just create a Claude.md file or project.md file that explains all this stuff. And you can ask Claude to write it. So tell Claude, hey, I'm going to be using text-to-SQL. I want to create a document that more effectively routes my queries to the right databases. Here is all my information, and it'll help write that system prompt for you. That's a great way to do this on an individual level. If you're working in a company and you need this to be a shared resource or approach across the business, you're probably going to need your engineering team to build a custom MCP tool or some kind of instrumentation that gets in between your API calls and the prompt. So this, I have to think about how this could be done with the standard MCP with Metabase, but I've worked with clients where they built their own MCP tooling, and those instructions are baked into into like an MD file or a JSON file somewhere. But at the end of the day, your question is right, which is helpful to give it attention or give it instructions that tell it where to look or tell it where not to look. I've worked with customers that have 15,000 tables, in big banks, and there's 80% of it is legacy, and you just don't want the bot or the LLM going anywhere near that. So you just need to find a way to manage context and manage its context. So on a user level, yeah, Claude.mds or system prompts in Claude Cowork, or on a company level, you need to talk to engineering to find some way to inject that system prompt into the API call.
Awesome. Thank you, Steven. I think we can fit one more question, and I think this one would be interesting. Colin said, I know we're talking about MCP versus CLI, but I will be very interested to know when MCP should be used versus Metabot and how they vary. My use case primarily is serving non-technical users.
Right. So they're kind of doing the same thing. They're different doorways. So Metabot, it's going to use your own keys, so it can use the same models. I will say that there are some system prompts and instructions inside of Metabot that will differ from the MCP. and it's going to behave differently. But I think the main difference between the MCP and which I need to verify, is that it has more tools. So I don't know if Metabot can build dashboards yet.
No, it can't. So you're right. Like,
Got
yes.
it. Okay. So it's tools is the main thing. And honestly, Metabot's great. The reason I like Metabot is you can ask questions and get answers back. I also like that it has a Slack integration. So you can bring it into a shared channel and your team can ask those questions and the data analyst can audit those queries, which is cool. But honestly, MCP is kind of where it's at now because it has more tools. It can do more things.
Perfect. And if you don't mind, we can do one more. I think this one is interesting. So Frank says, can I share a dashboard for inspiration and have it recreated? Or could I build the dashboard in HTML using Cloud and use Metabase as the engine behind it?
The answer is yes to both. Do it in HTML because if you're using an image, it's going to rely on computer vision, which Claude is good at. I would benchmark this actually. My guess is that feeding it an HTML dashboard is going to perform better and probably burn less tokens. But you could do both. So if you're using Claude Code or Claude Cowork, put that image or that HTML file in a folder and say, here is a layout or here's a dashboard, build something in the same structure as this. So you absolutely can do that. My recommendation would be HTML, but I think it could still work with an image. Honestly, if you are a Metabase user, it's going to go so much better if you have a Metabase dashboard for it to reference, because then it has access to everything, what's under the hood of it. But yes, you can give it a reference image or HTML file, and it should build something close to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everything, Steven. It's been great.